The reports that the United States has withdrawn most of the troops it deployed to Nigeria earlier this year to support the country's fight against Islamist militants, following what both countries described as a successful joint military operation. The deployment followed a joint operation launched by Nigerian and U.S. forces in the Lake Chad Basin in December, during which coordinated strikes were carried out against militant targets on Christmas Day, and about 200 U.S. troops were deployed 2 months later to support the operation. According to the U.S. officials, the mission resulted in the killing of senior Islamic State leader Abu Bilal al-Manuki and significantly weakened the group's command structure in Nigeria. Earlier, the General Davinder Singh, the commander of the U.S. Air Forces in Africa, says the operation had disrupted both the local leadership of ISIS and its links to the group's global network, limiting its ability to coordinate attacks. According to him, quote, the group's leadership in Nigeria has been significantly degraded. Despite the troop withdrawal, Nigerian military authority says security cooperation between both countries would continue. Let's get some insight. What is mean? Can Nigeria survive what has become a major cooperation that has led to some successes? Some security consultants and experts would have defined the situation over the last few months. We saw what happened in Sokoto, part of Borno, and some of the intelligence that has been gathered, which has helped in the execution of some of the leadership of the terrorists. And recently, we saw a very high level or an increasing attack on terrorists, leading to rescue of a lot of abductees and also what has become a consistent over the last month, at least in the last 1 month, we've seen a consistent taking the wall to the terrorists. And a few days ago, I showed you a list of the pictures of many of the attacks that the Nigerian troops have staged on the terrorist groups. Let's get some insight into what this means. The cooperation. Security seems to be a major, a big deal for Nigerians, and especially what this government promised and what the cooperation that they've gotten from the United States could mean. I'm being joined tonight by a security consultant and anti-extremism and terrorism expert, Dr. Bulama Bukati, who is equally a lawyer, is live for us virtually on the program. Thank you so much, Dr. Bulama, for joining us tonight on the program.
Thank you, Sean. It's always a pleasure to join you.
Yeah. Before I get into the primary concern of our conversation, let me get your view on what I've personally noticed, because I've been on top of this security situation, and more than anyone ever, I take up this matter almost every day. And perhaps one thing that got my attention is the update we have gotten over the last month of increasing attack on terrorist organization, degrading of their capacity. Then we get everyday updates on what the military has done. So I was worried. I was somewhat drawn to some of these updates. I'm concerned to know, curious to know rather, whether this is just some kind of increase in communication of the military, or different from what we've seen before, or actual attack or operation that has become more increasing in the last month. But from your own point of view, what you have seen, what you have heard, the report you have gotten, and even the military had given a report a few days ago about their operation over the last 1 month or so. In your estimation, how do you describe this scenario that's played out over the 1 month?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, I think you are right that there appears to be increased military onslaught or pressure on violent extremist groups and terrorists across Nigeria over the last month or so. But I would say it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, there has been increased government effort, security forces efforts. On the other hand, there had been some increased attacks in some parts of Nigeria, and we can go into each of these separately. When it comes to government's renewed effort, I think you are right that the Nigerian government has renewed its efforts to rescue abducted Nigerians, to fight terrorists and violent extremist groups in different parts of Nigeria, and honestly, to go on the offensive in some places where they haven't been on the offensive in the past. As I understand it, one of the major operations right now is going on in Oyo State, where we had the school children and their teachers abducted. The challenge has always been for the Nigerian government: how do you diversify your capacity? How do you make sure that you can launch a major attack in Oyo State, but also sustain the efforts in Zamfara as well as the Northeast? What tends to happen is the government merging or combining most of its power in one area. For example, Oyo State right now, because of the exigency of the situation with the abduction of the school children and their teachers. What then that does is to give breathing space for the bandits in Zamfara, in Sokoto, in Kebbi, in Borno State. And therefore, I think the major challenge for government is: how do you strengthen our security forces' capacity to be able to carry out 2, 3, 4 major onslaughts at the same time? This is number one. Secondly, how do you sustain the operations themselves? Because what tends to happen in the past is there would be a major attack in a particular area. It will cause major public outrage, and government will then merge all its power to pounce on the fighters or the culprits there. But then for how many weeks? Sometimes it will be for 4 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks. They will then come back to Abuja and take a victory lap that they have succeeded. And then that allows the groups to regroup, to rebuild, and to re-emerge. And so the first is, how do we diversify our effort to launch major onslaughts at the same time? And number two, how do we sustain those onslaughts until we are sure violent extremist groups and terrorist organizations are degraded to a level that they would never bounce back? This is one side. The other side shown is the fact that we have seen attacks in places in Nigeria that we had not seen before, and some of them took place in the last month or so. The Oyo attack, for example, some parts of Kwara State that are being terribly affected that were not affected previously, or even expansion in places where we know, and also the emergence of new groups in the Northwest in particular, because over the last month or so, we have confirmed that Janim, that is Jamaatul Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, the Al-Qaeda affiliate operating in Mali, the one that is responsible, operating in the Sahel, the one that is responsible for the recent attacks we saw in Mali that killed the defense minister and injured the intelligence head and took over some villages in Mali. We can now confirm for sure that they do have a cell. It may be a small cell, but they do have a cell in northwestern Nigeria, and they have started operations. Also, the Islamic State Sahara province has been able to establish a cell in northwestern Nigeria. And this is in addition to the Kurawa, is in addition to the bandits. And so on the one hand, you will see increased government efforts, which should be commended. But on the other hand, you will see expansion of this crisis to new areas, as well as emergence of new groups that we did not see before. And I think all of this tells us that killing one leader or the other cannot cut it. We have to sustain this effort. We have to also then address the root causes after we have sustained the kinetic effort and have dealt a dying blow on these groups.
I'm understanding, and you have your ears to the ground. I speak to quite a lot of men on the field and soldiers who sometimes reach out to tell us what the situation in the war front. And I understand that there is perhaps a more significant coordination from a central top. And I'm understanding that Nuhu Ribadu, the NSA, might be playing a more central role in coordination and advisory as far as some of these operations is concerned. What I'm also learning, and I stand to also get more information about that, but they're making an elitist in terms of operation out of some of our elite squad a unified elitist operation where they can easily deploy and tackle situation. And that's why some people say the reason why we have seen some of these rescue, because they have decided to take an elitist, a little number of the different aspects of our military operations, put them in an elitist squad to be able to attack some of these situations, align them to be able to speedily respond to some of these. These are some of the information I'm getting. I'm also learning that we may be lucky that we have gotten some sophisticated weaponry where a lot of people may not be aware of. Albeit, I'm understanding that it may not be a lot. Maybe these are some of the reasons why we have seen some successes on the side of the Nigerian military. One is happy that this is happening. This is not Nigerian army, I understand. This is the defense headquarters. And we've got, from what I understand, that the NSA, Nuhu Ribadu, is paying a more significant and coordination of most of what we see today. What do you make of this kind of this development that we hear about the trajectory or the new style or the model which has been adopted?
No, I mean, Sean, my information aligns very well with your own. To be honest, we have to give credit where it is due. It is also my understanding that Malam Nuhu Ribadu, the National Security Advisor, number one, sees himself as the National Security Advisor for the whole country. You know, past National Security Advisors mostly saw themselves as National Security Advisors to the President. So they became Presidential Security Advisor. But I think he sees himself more as National Security Advisor, and your information is correct, aligns with mine that he is very much hands-on in coordinating the operations and also following up to ensure accountability and transparency in the operations that are happening. Number three, we have on this program and on several other programs, I have always lamented on lack of coordination between the federal government and state governments. And one of the innovations introduced by Malam Nuhu Ribadu when he became the NSA was to establish a directorate, a whole directorate called Directorate of State Liaison, whose duty or work is to coordinate between the National Security Advisor's Office and state governments, and as well as commissioners of security or commissioners of peace or whoever is in charge of peace or security in those states. And I think in that way, he was able to not only advise the president regarding national policies, but also advise the government, the state governments on how they can contribute to both the kinetic and the non-kinetic. One other thing that the National Security Advisor's Office has paid a lot of attention recently is the non-kinetic effort. How do you address the root causes? And I know that a lot of work is going into that. And so I completely agree with you that some of the successes we see is down to better coordination, is down to a national security advisor that is more hands-on, but it is not yet Uhuru. There is still a lot of work to be done. And I think, therefore, my call to the National Security Advisor is to continue to do whatever he has been doing over the past few months. Number one, for these onslaughts to continue. But also, Sean, one thing we saw under the current National Security Advisor is a large number of suspects being arraigned and being prosecuted, being convicted or discharged. I think over 1,000 people, if my memory serves me well. I am not, don't bank on my numbers, but I know that like 500 were tried recently, and before them another 400 or so were tried. So we see more trials. We have also seen more arrests of some of the biggest leaders. We know that Al-Mainoki was killed in the Northeast recently, but even in the Northwest, we saw some of the biggest leaders of the Mahmuda group, for example, of Ansaru, for example, who were arrested. And these are successes we did not see in past administrations. Shewan, that doesn't mean that the challenge has disappeared or is disappearing. The challenge is still mammoth. There is still a big security challenge in Nigeria. And like I said at the top of, in the first segment, some of it is even expanding to new areas. So we have to continue to innovate. We have to continue to coordinate better and to make sure that we have defeated these security threats that are becoming a big threat to our country, unfortunately.
All right. I'll take a moment just to take a breather and come back. But a lot of what we're hearing and the style and the trajectory or the model in which some of the headship of our security agencies are taking are quite interesting. It does look like in the initial stage, it wasn't working. But whatever that has happened in the last 1 month calls for some kind of attention because there seems to be a lot of traction. You look at what the NSA is said to be doing, what the DHQ also is doing in their coordination. You look at what the IGP also came in. He was focusing on state police. It does look like that was his mandate. He set up a committee in that regard, and they want to focus more on community policing. You see what DSS and Tosin Ajayi, what he's doing. The man is focusing on more civil and legal way of prosecuting, pursuing. You grab a terrorist, you make sure that you get a death sentence for him. These are some strategic things that are being done. Whether it's going to have a long-term effect and it's going to stay like that for as long as these terrorists are being degraded, they are killed and they throw them into jail and into prison, and we forget the key in the ocean. It's good for Nigeria, but how can we sustain it? Then I'll come back to ask you about America's withdrawal, Africans, and operation in Nigeria, what it means. Were they successful? It may be the success from the American point of view, but what is the interest of Nigeria and the Nigerian people? Well, we'll take a breather. We'll be right back, everyone. Join us. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying with us. Dr. Bulama Bukati has been speaking with us on the program. Dr. Bukati, would you say the United States joint operation significantly degraded Islamic State leadership in Nigeria? And would you say they justified the withdrawal of its troops? You know, because attacks by insurgents continue. Was this genuinely a strategic victory or merely a tactical success with limited long-term impact? How would you describe the situation?
So, Sean, it is true that one of the most successful operations ever conducted in Nigeria's history fighting violent extremism was the operation against Al-Mainoki, because not only Al-Mainoki was killed, very many senior operatives and commanders of ISWAP who were with Al-Mainoki at the time the attack took place also died with him. And remember that Al-Mainoki was like the godfather, the mastermind of ISWAP in Nigeria, but also was playing a significant role globally. And also what his death meant was that almost every single person that was in the same generation as the founders of Boko Haram is now dead. And therefore what is left of ISWAP and Boko Haram are people who were born into the crisis. And there are two sides to this. There is both the upside and the downside. The upside is that this operation has significantly degraded ISWAP tactically. The word tactically is doing a lot here, because I say tactically because this victory is going to be temporary unless and until we sustain the effort against them. And we have seen in the past, when Muhammad Yusuf was killed, the administration under whom was killed, the Eradu administration, took a victory lap and they said they have defeated Boko Haram because Muhammad Yusuf was killed. A few years ago, like 5 years ago, when Shekau died, the face of Nigerian terror or global terrorism, if you like, we were all clapping that was the end of Boko Haram, but that wasn't the end of Boko Haram or ISWAP. And therefore, the killing of Al-Mainoki, even though has disrupted the group significantly, including by the group's own admission, because they have been admitting in ISIS's Al-Naba'a magazine that their operations in Nigeria have been significantly disrupted because of that operation. However, if history has taught us anything, it is their capacity to, it is their resilience, their capacity to re-emerge after these kinds of setbacks. And therefore, my advice is for the Nigerian government and their US partners to continue this intelligence-led operation, to continue to pounce on ISWAP until it is degraded to a level that will make it impossible for it to come back. Now, the downside of it, and of course, this is not a criticism against the operation, is that now ISWAP is going to be handed over or has been handed over to children who were born into terrorism. Remember that their parents were peaceful, they knew the joy of city life, but they abandoned that and they adopted this life of terrorism and cruelty. Now, these children were people who were born into it. And the son of a terrorist is more brutal than the terrorist himself. And so Nigeria has to be very careful, and that's why we cannot relent in our effort. We have to continue the operation. And if the Al-Mainoki operation has taught us anything, it is the importance of intelligence over firepower. You need firepower in order to succeed, but your firepower is useless if you do not have accurate, up-to-date intelligence that you can use for your to direct your firepower. And I think that is one thing that Nigeria has to do to sustain the gains we have seen recently.
You know, the American interest in any country is to the, since 9/11, is to the extent that they want to degrade any terrorist capability to be able to attack American soil. So a lot of people will say the political agenda of America is sometimes not to the local politics or the local interests where they operate, because they have a larger picture, and their bigger picture is the interest of America. Once they see terrorism thrive in any, and they see that the connection could link to America or any American interest, they help, they go and assist. So there are those who will say the description of American success in his own language against us is to the extent in which they think that it could not come back to hit them as a nation. Is that the truth here? But it doesn't mean that Nigeria can no longer stay under the threat of this Islamic State.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are right that this description of yours could be one part of American interest. Their interest is to degrade terrorism so that it doesn't reach their soil. But I think Trump's interest with the troops deployment was more narrow and more parochial and more personal, Sheun. I think Trump deployed the troops because he wanted to portray himself as a protector of Christianity for his base in America. And even though these troops were posted to the northeast, where we know most of the victims have been Muslims, Christians have been killed. I mean, the Boko Haram, we know that doesn't separate anyone from anyone. They don't ask people their religion or their tribe or their part of the country. But even now, Trump said he was withdrawing because he has stopped the slaughter of Christians. I think, like I said on your program previously, Trump doesn't care about Nigerian lives. What he cares about is his politics. And for him, he was playing politics. But someone like me was okay with the deployment because I knew that America has capacities and capabilities that we do not have as Nigeria. But my preference has always been, and is right now, that we need intelligence and the unique American capability to be transferred to the Nigerian troops so that we fight our own battles, we fight our own wars with the support of our friends. We don't want any permanent American base in Nigeria, and that's why I was very happy to hear that they have withdrawn their troops. But I was also happy then to hear that the Americans are saying, we are not abandoning Nigeria. We will continue the intelligence cooperation. We will continue the training. We need them to continue the training. We will need them to continue to share.
But you know, Dr. Bulama, that the troops didn't give Nigeria 100% trust. And I'm talking about field intelligence that I get to the extent that America acted, or those troops acted almost sometimes isolatedly because of the distrust in keeping intelligence that they gather. They use it solely, and some of the Nigerian troops get to know later on when they are almost done with the execution of the intelligence that they've gathered. But the question here, and my worry, is whether or not Nigeria can sustain the gains alone. We know the capacity. We know that America measure by some indices what the capacity of some of these terror cells could be. The defense headquarters said that the withdrawal of U.S. troops will not affect ongoing operations. From your own assessment of the Nigeria's military capabilities, Is that confidence justified?
Yeah, so I mean, the information that the American troops did not trust our troops much is new information to me. I didn't know, and I want to be honest about that. And if that was what happened, to be honest, unless there is some operational reasons for that, then it's going to be highly unfortunate. My advocacy in the West, in the United Kingdom, in Europe, and in the United States of America is always for Western governments to presume good intent on the part of African leaders. You cannot say you love Africans more than African leaders. If anyone will be happy with any success right now in Nigeria, it should be President Tinubu because he is the president of Nigeria. And my hope and prayer is that he wants Nigeria to succeed. He wants killings to be stopped under him. And I think the Americans would be arrogant if they thought they love Nigeria or they love Nigerians more than their own government. But this applies to African countries where foreign troops, foreign governments don't listen to our governments the way they should listen. They think they know what we want better than us, but we know what we want better than them. So that's what I would say on this. On whether Nigeria can sustain its gains, recent gains, after the American withdrawal, my answer is yes, if Nigeria continues the efforts they started right now. You talked about the renewed role that the National Security Advisor has been playing. For example, my information is that the National Security Advisor meets very regularly with every single part of the Nigerian law enforcement security agencies and the army that is involved in any operation in Nigeria. And this means they would coordinate better. But you have also seen shown that most of the operations recently have been very intelligence-led, whether in terms of arrest, whether the prosecutions, whether the killing of some of the strategic leaders, and that is what we need to continue. But one thing we are not giving enough attention to, and you and I have discussed this time and again here, Sheun, is Nigeria has still not given enough effort to dismantling the supply and finance routes of these terrorist organizations. And unless and until we have stopped their finance and supply routes, we stop the supply of fuel into the bush, we stop the supply of arms and ammunition into the bush, unless our borders are more secure, unless we are able to patrol the areas of the jungles from where supplies are taken into the bush, we are in for a long hold. And therefore, my call for the government is to give renewed attention to dismantling the supply and logistic routes, to dismantling the finance routes of these groups so that we may finish with them once and for all.
Yeah.
The issue is let's prioritize intelligence over firepower. Yeah. If we did that with the support of our international partners, we are capable to succeed against these groups.
I mean, you remember the scenario of the gas mask situation that terrorists went to procure when America was coming on the Nigerian soil to do an extraction. And there were intelligence sharing of how to gas out some of these terrorist groups and be able to extract these people. And this was under Jonathan. And you remember what happened when the terrorists just were identified to have gone to procure gas masks to avoid that operation, which got the foreign troops worried about the leakage of intelligence. And there are those who, if you remember, the December attack in Sokoto, there are those who said that most of the ground troops were not really aware. The heavy lifting was done by the American troops because of some level of isolated action. And there are those who say whether or not Nigeria was carried along. But albeit, if America says they've degraded it, my own concern as a journalist, as a Nigerian, is whether or not we can sustain how our polity is held together, the further securing of the lives and the livelihood of every Nigerian is my concern. But my final question to you, Dr. Bukati, is we're going into an election period, and it's more sensitive. And every election cycle, you know what happened. We had to shift election a few times in this country because of insecurity situation. The worry is that whether the timing of this withdrawal is ripe or not, and what we need to do, if you were the National Security Advisor, or you were to say something to the president, yes, tonight, to ensure that this security is nipped in the bud. The so-called successes and the traction that I've talked about, how can we ensure that it is reality and it's not a fleeting kind of victory that we have seen?
Yeah, I mean, so Sheun, I'll just make a quick comment on the difference between the Al-Mainoki operation and the operation in Sokoto. The operation in Sokoto, like you said, was led by the Americans. In fact, it was airstrikes from outside Nigeria by the Americans. But the Al-Mainoki operation, even by the Americans on account, was intelligence shared by Americans, but the operation itself conducted by Nigerians. And that is the kind of operation I want to see. Nigerian-led battles, Nigerian-led wars against our brutal groups supported by our friends, not just America, but other friends across the world who may have unique capacities that we do not have. When it comes to what the presidency and the national security advisor need to do to sustain this, is, I mean, this question, Sean, reminds me that close to every election, whether during President Jonathan or whether under President Buhari, two things happen. Number one, you will see increased attacks and increased discussions and outrage on social media. And then you will see increased effort by the government. And even under Jonathan, when the election was postponed by 6 weeks, they made huge gains in those 6 weeks because they did the work very well. So my call to this administration is to not only restrict this renewed effort to this election time. If they got re-elected, and I don't know if they will get re-elected or someone else will become president, they should sustain whatever effort they are making now, but they need to build on it. How do they build on it? It is targeting the logistics and supply routes that I talked about. It is coordinating better between the security agencies, which something that is that is becoming better now. But also, how do we use technology better, Sheun? Can't we use some of the drones we see elsewhere? For example, bandits, when they attack in 300, in 250, in 350. Their most vulnerable moments are the periods when they climb their motorcycles in twos and in trees and driving or riding to their target location or back from their target location. Can we use technology and drones to attack them at periods like those so that we can eliminate them more easily? Can we use surveillance drone to secure our borders better? These are some of the issues that we need to look at and some of the efforts we need to do. But also on the policy side, how better can we coordinate with state level? What kind of policies can be introduced by the federal government that can be implemented at the state level? How are we making sure that the state police that is being introduced becomes a net gain rather than a net negative? These are some of the issues the current administration needs to look at and build on if we were to succeed.
Dr. Bulama Bukati is a lawyer, is expert in violent extremism and terrorism. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight and some of the insights you have shared. Always a pleasure having you on.
No, thank you very much, Sean, for the opportunity to contribute to my country. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.